This episode of the podcast features Brad Finn. Brad is a YouTube creator with 20,000 followers who focuses on finance and investing. We chat about his journey out of debt, his current financial game plan, including his option strategy, as well as the importance of financial literacy in our school system. Enjoy the episode.
It's simple. Warren Buffett says it clearly in his book. It's buy low, sell high. So I'm buying low and selling high. It's really simple for me. Warren Buffett knows what he's talking about.
Don't you mean Warren Buffett?
All right, everybody, welcome to episode 12 of the Richuation Room. It's July 27th, 2020, and today we have Brad Finn on. Brad, how's it going?
Man, I'm very happy to be here. This is a great opportunity for me, so thank you so much for having me. I'm doing awesome.
Yeah, very excited to have you on today. We're going to get into a bunch of good topics, hoping to maybe delve into some things that I haven't talked to before with the other guests that I've had. So just for the people who don't follow you and aren't familiar with your background, if you wouldn't mind kind of giving us a little bit of a rundown on who you are and then kind of what led you to be where you are today.
Yeah, man. So my name is Brad Finn. I'm a 38-year-old school teacher. I teach high school physics and science, married with 2 kids, living the dream, 2 kids under 2. And I run a YouTube channel just called Brad Finn. It's actually gone through a couple different names, which we could get to at another time. But it started off as Baby Steps Brad. I began my YouTube journey and my personal finance journey trying to attack debt and get out of debt. I woke up 2 years ago as a spender with a pretty good income. My wife had a pretty good income as well, a small business, a house, cars, the traditional living the American dream at 36, to find out that I had a net worth somewhere in the neighborhood of minus $30,000, which I was blown away. So I got onto the Dave Ramsey program and really decided that I needed to focus on my debt and, creating a legacy. This was before I had children, back September 2017. And shortly after, unfortunately, my dad passed away, and it was a wake-up call because he was living the same life as me, and he passed away. He had nothing. He had no money, nothing to his name, and that wasn't the legacy that I wanted to leave. And I don't think he did anything wrong. I think he was just uneducated on the subject of personal finance. So it really motivated me to, get my voice out there, show people not only my successes, but my mistakes here on YouTube and things like that. And I have a very small Instagram page so people can get a face with the name, and that's at the Finn Mindset over there on Instagram.
Very cool. So we'll get into more of the YouTube conversation a little bit later, potentially, but you talked about kind of waking up and realizing that, this isn't the financial aspect that you wanted to be in life. Was there one, you talked about your father, was there anything else that maybe you realized, how have I been living like this and potentially putting myself into debt? Or was it just kind of a culmination of things over time that made you realize that you needed to take steps to get out of that position?
Well, Richie, I'm sure you've heard the cliche, behind every great man is a great woman. And I'd gotten married the November before this. And at the time also got a small inheritance from my grandma passing away. And throughout that spring, my wife had said to me, Brad, we're bleeding money here. We're running out of money. And I said to myself, with the money that we got from the wedding, we didn't do a honeymoon. We didn't really do any of that. So I was like, okay, we have money from the wedding. Grandma gave us $20,000. There's no way we're bleeding money. Well, as a school teacher, you don't get paid over the summer. And I go to pay my mortgage that September 2017, and we couldn't make the mortgage payment. And I said to my wife, like, Tara, we don't have enough money to pay the mortgage. And she's like, yeah, Brad, I've been trying to tell you this for 6 months. And like I said, I feel like there's 2 types of people in the world when it comes to like problems with money. The people that don't have money and income and need to work on that side of the equation, and the people that have money and are spenders, where the fact that I was fortunate enough to at least have a really big income, but the lifestyle creep, as my income went up, my lifestyle creep continued with it. And there was a feeling of embarrassment looking at my wife and saying, wow, we can't make the mortgage. And like I said, I had a small business that was a multi-million-dollar grossing business at the time, 2 teaching jobs here in New York. We make 6-figure salaries, and I can't pay my $2,000 mortgage. So it was kind of like hitting that rock bottom financially for me. And it was a huge awakening. And then there was just these little signs along the way, like my dad passing away, that, really opened my eyes and kept me motivated to say, all right, the things that I thought or the things that I was feeling in my gut, they're actually true. but it was really my wife. She was the one that kept chirping in my ear, and she kind of let me fall flat on my face before I really realized how bad it was.
It's funny, there are so many people in this country and really in the world that live that lifestyle of getting into debt and it never changes. And I don't think they ever have that realization that you've had and make steps in the right direction. I've been fortunate enough to, through a series of events, also just kind of being educated early, kind of got lucky there to kind of have that understanding that debt is not a place you want to be. Obviously, we can talk about good debt, but we're talking about just general consumer debt and those kind of things. When you kind of got yourself in that position, if you don't mind me asking, was this just a lifestyle that just accrued and it was just kind of like a, hey, this is how we live and not really thinking any further into it than that?
Yeah, I think we went back. We definitely went back and looked at what we were doing. Obviously, when you get caught in these situations, or the number one question people ask themselves is, where did all the money go? Right? I'm making all this money. Where did all this money go? And our money pretty much went to eating out and social activities. Like I said, back to that being a teacher, it was very easy for us to eat out a couple of nights of the week. We were in our early 30s, and we were just having a great time as teachers. Like I said, we knew we had money. We like to party. We like to have a good time. And living on the South Shore here in Long Island, the beach is beautiful, and the beach bars and the tiki bars are even better. And you go out a couple times a week, you have a bottle of wine and dinner, and what seems like what normal people can do on, maybe a once a month basis and go out have $100 dinner. We were doing that on a weekly basis. And I think, I don't remember the rough numbers, but I think when we first looked at it in September, that August, we had spent almost like $3,000 at restaurants.
Wow.
And that was, it was, like I said, that wasn't so much the embarrassing thing, but luckily we knew that that could be a change. And luckily we found this out like right as we went back to work and right as we got back into school and fall and things started to calm down, that we were able to really slow our lifestyle down because we knew that we wanted to have children, and we were able to look long term. We've always been good with like avoiding that instant gratification. It was just more of just being uneducated, not realizing the holes that we had in our financial bucket. And I think that was really what it was for us. We would have no problem getting on a plane and going away for a long weekend because we had the money. That's what we kept saying to ourselves. We can afford it. We have the money. But it turns out you can't just have the money that you're making. You need to save some for the future. And that's the part that we were really missing.
Absolutely. And I think it's very easy to get into these cycles of lifestyle where it doesn't seem like you're doing anything drastic. You spend $50 at a restaurant one night and then you do it 2 days later. That kind of feeling, I guess, may have faded, and then you kind of can buy again and buy again. And when you look back, kind of like you talked about, when you see what it adds up to actually be, is when it can maybe be a little bit more of a realization. And even myself, I mean, I'm pretty money conscious, but prior to really the lockdowns and everything going on with COVID, I was enjoying going out to bars and going out to restaurants and was always conscious. I never really wanted to spend too much money. But the thing that being forced to stay home showed me was like, wow, I'm saving a lot more money than I was previously. So even, I feel like no matter what state you get to, there's always a little bit of a checks and balance that need to happen when you kind of look back on what you're doing and what your spending habits are like. When you guys finally took that step and you realized, hey, we're going to do something about this, how did you get educated on actually getting out of debt? And then what steps did you take?
So I'm a 0 to 100 kind of guy. I don't know how to do anything in the middle. So once literally when I found out it was September 1st and I went to make that mortgage payment and I couldn't. And I don't think I slept that night. I was researching everything you could possibly research on the internet to try and figure out what was going on here. And the next morning I woke up and burst into the bedroom and said, Tara, that's it. We're not going out to eat. We're getting out of debt. I'm going to teach you about the debt snowball. I listened to Dave Ramsey all night, and she's like, whoa, let's pump the brakes a little bit. I'm like, nope, no pumping the brakes. And she's like, let me go get my coffee. I'm like, you better be making that coffee because we're not buying Starbucks anymore. It was a full blown transition. And I think I started definitely. I owe all of my debt freedom to Dave Ramsey, and throughout the past 3 years, his teachings and my philosophies have, they've come and gone and they've kind of diverged apart. There's some things that are definitely different, but like I said, my YouTube channel started as Baby Steps Brad, and without that knowledge and without him giving me that tough love, I'm a tough love kind of person. I think that I never would have been able to succeed. And then also too, being grounded by my wife and having that extreme support system. And like I said, both of us having those long-term goals to be able to say, okay, maybe we don't have to go as extreme as Dave Ramsey necessarily wants us to go, but we can definitely adapt a different type of lifestyle and learn as we go. And that, and then the accountability piece of the YouTube channel, and not wanting to come on and tell people what I was doing if it wasn't necessarily the right thing, that accountability from that aspect and that angle. There was so many different factors that led to the success, but early on, Dave Ramsey definitely helped. And then my wife not killing me when I told her how much she had to change her lifestyle. And it's incredible now. I look back at it and it feels like forever ago how much, you adapt to that new lifestyle. You're just talking about COVID. And, when things start to open up again, I think you'll realize that, you know, I don't need to go out as much anymore, or I was perfectly content being home. Like when we got out of debt, the number one thing people kept asking us is like, where are you going? You're going to travel? You're going to, what are you going to do now that you're debt free? And we just looked at each other and said, we're kind of just going to keep doing what made us successful over the past 2 years. And nothing really has changed. We're both the same simple people as we learned to be over the last couple of years.
Right. Yeah, I think those are two pretty cool driving factors. Dave Ramsey does a really good job of laying stuff out. I think blanket statement, like you said, he gives you tough love. It's funny to watch those people call in with silly questions, and he kind of sets them straight. And then the other thing that I think is more impressive is, like you said, it's got to be difficult to be living a certain way and then make a drastic change on the spot and then see how your partner's going to react to it. Obviously, it sounded like your wife was maybe the one kind of pushing you guys in this direction a little bit earlier, but I can imagine how if you're living a certain way for a long time and then to kind of give it up and have be working towards a goal that is not going to be night and day, it's going to take years to kind of develop over time, can be kind of a hard thing to adjust to initially.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah, she definitely, and the greatest thing, and she's a wonderful woman. She never reprimanded. She never, attacked the things I was doing. I said we were spenders. Like if I wanted a bicycle, I went out and bought a $5,000 bicycle, and she would kind of shake her head and never reprimanded. She was just she was always just a presence. She was always just a reminder, and she was there to let me know. And then, yeah, it's like, I never would have been able to do it. It sounds cliche and, it's super cheesy and a romantic love story, but I don't, and I tell people all the time, you don't need a spouse, but anything anything that's difficult is worth finding somebody to get on board with. Like it's easier to work out with a workout partner. It's easy to get through anything that's difficult if you have somebody else. And if I didn't have her, I'd still be spending more than I made, and I wouldn't be nearly as financially successful as I am today.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. So 2 years pass by, you get out of debt. Obviously, your YouTube channel has shifted over time, and obviously it's still rooted in those primary kind of core values there. But talk to us a little bit about what the next step was in taking your financial grounding to the next level. So you're out of debt. Now you're starting to think about maybe start savings or start investing. Kind of what was the next step there?
Yeah, it sounds like a first world problem, but I tell people it's almost harder not being in debt than it is being in debt. And what I mean by that is when you have consumer debt, you have one job. You wake up in the morning, you have one job, pay off your debt. There's no real choices. People want to create choices and options and different paths to follow to get out of debt, but it's all rooted at its core. Get rid of the consumer debt and stop paying people interest. Once you're out of debt, the ways that you can grow your net worth and the ways that you can grow your wealth, there's so many different reasons. There's different ways. And it's been almost a little stressful being out of debt and figuring out ways to invest. But the channel, you talk about the core values. My core values are still like, as far as let's get out of debt, consumer debt number one, and then the channel pretty much preaches, index fund investing, JL Collins, A Simple Path to Wealth. I'm VTSAX all day. That's my first and foremost, and taking advantage of these retirement accounts. And right now I'm making a lot of videos about my dividend investing and covered calls and trading options. And I have to be very, very clear to people that this is money. I just made a video. This is money that's above and beyond me maxing out my 403Bs, my 457s, my Roth, my HSA, my Flex. That all had to come way before I ever had a brokerage account. And it's snowballs. And when I heard Dave Ramsey say like that debt is going to slow down our wealth so much, I never realized how much it really does. And compounding happens so much faster, especially when you're as blessed as I am to have a pretty good income. The last almost year now, we've been almost debt free for a year, has been a balance and an educational process. It's been that making that personal finance personal, making it what's best for Brad Finn and his family on Long Island as teachers. There's so many different factors. And, I can't believe I just made my first real estate investment, and it was just writing a check for $92,000 out of the bank was something that if you would have told me 4 years ago was possible, that's I couldn't even imagine that in my wildest dreams. And I look back, and with just a little bit of discipline and with the support of other people, banged out $190,000 worth of debt, and then just bought a house for $92,000 in 4 years. And that's not to flex. That's to show the power of, sticking to your morals and not thinking about that short-term gratification, not caring what Tesla stock is doing today. Because at the end of the day, things like that don't really matter that much. If you have your foundation set in stone and you have a strong core value, then you're going to be successful regardless of how you invest that money and regardless of how you personally choose to grow wealth. It's almost like a fun game. I'm not that into sports, but I tell people I love the net worth is my scoreboard. And every day I think of my personal life. I think of myself as the CFO of, Fin Inc. People see my spreadsheet on YouTube and they're like, that's a funny name for your spreadsheet. I am the CFO of Fin Inc. And I have to make sure every single day that I wouldn't be fired if I got called into the office in front of the board of directors. And I think when people start to think their personal life as a business, as a way to generate money, be profitable, but save for downturns, I think literally anybody can be financially successful in a short amount of time, depending on how disciplined you want to be.
Absolutely. I think you're right. There's an overwhelming amount of information, especially right now, because it's so easily accessible. And if you're going to go on the internet and search how to invest or how to make money, I don't even want to know what the first few results are going to be, because they're probably going to lead you down some mistaken paths that a lot of us have taken and paid the price on, whether it's, speculative day trading and I'm involved in a little bit of everything, but, wrong cryptocurrencies, whatever you want to get into. But I think almost getting out of debt as the first thing might even be a better step to take in a weird sense. I'm not saying it's better to be in debt, but it's better than having like a lot of money and then figuring out how to invest it and how to figure that out, because it's going to ground you in the core principles of paying off high interest debt. Okay, now I have the excess money. What can I do with it, right? If you have the appreciation of getting out of debt, I would imagine the last thing you're going to do is put $20,000 in some crazy YOLO put that you see on Wall Street Bets or something like that.
You are speaking the truth. Like that is not an understatement what you just said. Like that is so true, that the grind of paying off debt made me appreciate money. And it also made me appreciate interest from both sides. When I looked and said, look at all this money I'm paying people in interest for simple things like like everyone's worried about like the returns of the stock market. Even my 6% loans, I was paying them so much money per year. I'm like, wait, if I can turn that around and make 4 to 6% back, oh man, the sky's the freaking limit. I know I cut you off, but you are so right. Like if I would have just woke up one day and was like, oh, I got a lot of money, let's start investing, I would have lost 100 grand because I would have lost it to education. I tell my father-in-law right now how easy it is to buy a stock or to make a covered call. And he's like, what do you mean? There's no, yeah, but what about the trading fees? I'm like, no, Dad, there's none of that anymore. They actually compete for low prices. Oh, expense ratios. I'm like, they're at 0.3 all the way down to 0 right now for index fund. And it just blows their mind. And you're right. It's a double-edged sword. I have seniors and they're playing around on Robinhood in school like they used to play Fortnite. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is an interesting situation we got going on here.
That's what I mentioned in a previous podcast. I was saying I'm not getting too into the details on, why the markets bounce back so much, and we're going to talk about that a little bit potentially later, but it's never been easier to be involved in the stock market. And apps like Robinhood, to me, literally make it seem like a game, right? It is so user friendly where you're just swiping, inputting numbers, it's all fancy, nice colors, and they probably do that for a reason, right? Because I know they're all about simplicity, but without commission, without all these barriers that there used to be, you don't have to call your broker. All these things that would inconvenience people in the past is now just thrown out the window. So you're right. You have 100K and you lose that 100K. Guess what you're going to probably try and do very quickly is try and make that 100K back. And we know how that's probably going to go as well. So it's just an interesting thing to think about where obviously nobody wants to be in debt, but having that groundwork and garnering that appreciation for money like you talked about is probably going to be way more beneficial in the long run. And I don't want to get too into the weeds on the specifics because obviously people can head over to your channel and check out all the awesome videos you have. But if you could just give a quick breakdown of kind of what your portfolio looks like in, just a quick little summary.
Absolutely. So I'm a front load investor. I'm not really for dollar cost averaging. So I know that dollar cost averaging happens automatically when people automate their investing, which I'm totally for. But when given the opportunity to have a lump sum, I'm a lump sum investor. So I am saving up money right now so that when I go back to work at the beginning of the year in January 2020, I could take 0 paychecks to max out my retirement accounts as fast as possible. Now, I'm blessed in the fact that I have an awesome 403B program and I have low fees. So I get to invest right into Vanguard. So the first thing that I do as I max out my 403B 19.5, my wife does the same, and that's 100% VTSAX. So my entire 403B 19,500 so far in 2020, VTSAX. I then move over to my 457, which is one of my favorite investing vehicles currently, if you can be lucky enough to get good fees. Here in the state of New York, it's through the New York State Deferred Compensation, and that is also in an index fund. It's not VTSAX, but it is an S&P 500 index fund with a low expense ratio. I think it's like 0.01%. And that allows me to put in another 19.5. The next thing I max after that is my flex for my independent care. So it's $5,000. I get that right back for my child care. And then after that, Roth IRA, I have to backdoor Roth because of my income. So that all gets done in one fell swoop. Put everything into the traditional and move it over to the next day. That is with Vanguard as well, VTSAX. So right there, it goes as, so I have almost $45,000 first. My first investments, $45,000 is all index funds, total stock market index funds. Then I can start to think about my dividend portfolio, my growth portfolio. I just made a video about the dangers of speaking about growth portfolios publicly. So I don't generally talk about how much I invest in what, but in my growth portfolio, I have 4 things. I have VGT, the Vanguard Information Technology. I have Apple. I have Microsoft. I am a plant-based eater, so I got in on the Beyond IPO. And then when it shot up that one day, I got my money out and I'm playing with house money on that. And then just because it's sexy and because I couldn't call myself a YouTuber if I didn't own some Tesla, I own some Tesla stock in my growth portfolio. My dividend portfolio is something that I really focus on, and I talk about the differences between growth and dividend. And as somebody that kind of wants that immediate payment, I focus more definitely on my dividend portfolio than I do on my growth. I really think that my IRAs and my 403Bs and 457s, that's kind of like my growth. Those are my long-term investments, but my dividend portfolio is pretty much going to be your safe dividend aristocrats, a little bit here, a little bit there. And I use those and I sell covered calls and cash secure puts on them to get a little bit of interest premiums. And then I do hard money loans for investing in real estate. Right now I'm flipping a house in Charleston, West Virginia. And that's something that I like to do as well. So I have a pretty good balance, but my core 90% is going to be in total stock market index funds. And then from there, the other 10% is pretty much split down the middle, 5% in dividends, 5% in growth. And then every time I can write a check for hard money. Right now I'm getting hard money loans for about 10% on my money inside the real estate investment world. That is as easy as going on biggerpockets.com and finding people that need a hard money loan and doing some research on them and finding somebody that's awesome.
Very cool. You kind of got a lot of things going on there. I think an interesting topic to talk about, where especially you see in the YouTube game, is it seems like the majority of investors' investments, if that makes sense, are the things that get the least amount of attention and the least amount and are the least sexy, right, on YouTube. So, if you went on there every day and talked about your Roth IRA and I don't even know all the different funds you talked about. I'm not honestly too familiar with those, but it probably wouldn't garner the same kind of attention than talking about the dividend portfolio and the growth portfolio and the options trading. Is that true?
Oh my man. So I started my YouTube channel on September 19th, 2017. I hit 10,000 subscribers on Cinco de Mayo this year. So it took me 3 years to get 10,000 subscribers talking about getting out of debt and my index funds. And I'm talking with a good buddy of mine, JJ Buckner, who's also here on YouTube. And he kind of went through the same thing just a couple of months behind me. And he's like, Brad, you got to tell people about the dividends. You have to. And I'm like, are people really that into it? And he's like, make a couple of videos, dedicate a month, make 8 dividend videos and see what happens. Well, in the last 3 months, I've gotten another 10,000 more subscribers. So 3 years for the first 10 and 3 months for the next 10. And I mean, there's a little bit of YouTube algorithm in there and a little bit of luck involved, as with anything that's happened on YouTube. But yes, there's absolutely more attention being paid to the dividend community, to the dividend portfolio community. I think that's who's watching YouTube in general. I think a younger generation tends to watch YouTube videos and follow creators like myself and other investors there on YouTube. But it's true. People don't want boring and slow. People want that instant gratification. But I'm not going to get away from that. I make sure that, my message is clear. I actually just had to make a video because I was getting so much flack from the older generation. Like, what do you mean your options trading? What about your retirement? I'm like, all right, buddy, I can see that you've only been a subscriber for 2 weeks. Let me just drop a couple of videos on you and talk about exactly what I've done before I got to the brokerage account. But yeah, absolutely, absolutely true. If you're going to start a YouTube channel and you are an index fund investor, you are going to get views and you are going to get a very, very loyal following, but that loyal following is going to be small. And it's not to say that I even cherish the bigger subscriber count. I don't really care how many subscribers I have. And that's not cliche. I really don't care. I care about the subscribers I have, not the amount of subscribers I can have. And it's different and it makes it more interesting. There's only so much you can come on and be like, I invest in VTSAX, but the data and the research part of me really loves dividend, really loves researching companies. And I was doing it, but I was so afraid to put that on YouTube. I really was. I'm, even though I have the cliche disclaimer that this is for entertainment purposes only and don't do what I do and make sure that all that stuff that you hear ethically as a 38-year-old guy and knowing the advice I've taken off YouTube, it still has to be in the back of my mind that some people are going to take it for gospel. And that's been the biggest fear for me. And gaining more subscribers is being very, very careful. And it's really the reason why I waited so long before I started talking about the individual stocks and the dividends and things like that, because I don't want to be the reason that somebody made the wrong choice, or I don't want people to think that what's working for Brad Finn is going to work for everybody, because I crash and burn. And the example that I used the other day is I used Nicola, and I was very open 2 months back when people were all over me for not mentioning Nicola and doing a video on it. I'm like, the only mention that it needs is that it doesn't have a product.
Yeah.
So it's simple as that. And if I would have came on and if I would have followed the YouTube algorithm and I cared about subscribers and I cared about views, it would have been very, very easy for me to make a video about Nicola. And this is not a knock to anybody that did, but it'd be very, very easy for me to go on with 20,000 subscribers and say, oh, this is the next best thing, blah, 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 blah. It would have done really well. The YouTube algorithm would have picked it up. But now a month later, all those people, they would, where's my credibility then? So that's something that I really need to think about when I go on and I'm changing the direction of the channel. And I have to make sure that I stay pretty true to my roots.
100%. I mean, you're keeping like you said, you care about the subscribers you do have, and people are going to see through something if it's just not you, right? They're gonna know pretty quickly that you can tell when something is forced and when something is genuine. And I also think in the same notion, it's okay to branch out and do different things. But the one thing I do appreciate, that I forget which video it was I was watching, it may have been the one today about covered calls. Maybe it was the one previously, like you talked about. But even though you were in those videos, you did mention, it was almost like a disclaimer in the beginning. It was like, hey, this is not, I'm not throwing all my money that I have into these options. Like, this is something that I've done after I have done steps 1 through 50, right? And this is step 50 and a half, right? This is just something I'm doing kind of to collect a little bit more income along the way. So I think having those disclaimers in there is kind of a good way to still be able to branch out in the way that you're investing, branch out in the information you can provide your subscribers, while also staying true to kind of those core principles we talked about earlier.
Rich, the best comment that I get is when people tell me that they feel comfortable and they feel like a genuine, authentic person is talking to them. That's the greatest comment that I could get on YouTube. And they're starting to come in more and more. And you said it best. Like, I try and give those disclaimers because I have to, but I also want people to know, because it's hard to give that disclaimer and then tell people like, oh, I'm just using these fun coupons,
Yeah.
like, oh, sucks for you that you don't have all this money. Like, I don't want to come across as that. So I have to stay balanced, and I have to find a healthy medium between, listen, yes, I do have a very, very good income. I'm very, very blessed, and I balance that really good income and being able to take some risks in some spots because of back to those foundations. I don't have any consumer debt. If I lose my job today, I'm living on $3,500 a month right now as a family of four on the South Shore, living on the ocean of Long Island. That's pretty much just my property taxes. Other than that, I pretty much live for nothing. So if I want to spend $3,000 on a covered call, with AT&T, even if that thing goes to zero, I'm not going to be out anything, but that could be severely different for somebody else. $3,000 for somebody else could be life-changing money. So I have to balance those two, and it becomes a little bit harder than it sounds.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's just about putting the right things out there and making sure. And some people are going to come across the channel, they're only going to see one video and they're never going to come back. And I think it's going to be hard to get that point across every single time. But like you said, I mean, as long as authenticity is coming through, I think that's what really will shine through in the long run, and that's what's going to keep people coming back and continue having a good group of subscribers continue to subscribe, not people that are just kind of looking for the quick and exciting videos, I guess, is one way to put it. We've alluded to it a few times already, and this is something that I just recently got interested in, and I actually sold my first covered call about a week ago, so I'm very fresh in the game here. But prior to this, prior to understanding your strategy or the wheel strategy that people talk about, I was kind of probably like a lot of people, where the assumption is that options trading is risky. Options trading, there's so much information you need to learn about to even have any idea of what you're doing. So if you wouldn't mind, really quickly, again, people can go over to Brad's channel to get a nice in-depth rundown, but talk to us a little bit about what your options strategy is.
So I think you make a really good point. I don't even think it goes for options. I think it's just investing in the stock market in general. Financial advisors want us to believe that it's this hocus pocus. It's this land of make believe, and they have a secret key. And regardless of who you are, you can't do your own research and figure it out. But the fact of the matter is that's not true at all. And the options, the thing what happens with options is there are so many different types of options. There's so many different ways that you can do options. Like saying that you don't like options in general it's just too vague. The umbrella is too big. And are there major risks? Yes, there has to be risk to have reward. But just like anything in life, like jumping off the diving board is a risk. Driving in your car is a risk. And it's not the things that are risky that hurt us. It's how we manage that risk and tolerate that risk, and how we weigh the risks that we face with what we can tolerate and what we can handle. I drive in my car knowing the risks because I don't speed. I wear my seatbelt. I don't drink and drive. I wear my glasses at night. And I try and mitigate that risk to the best of my ability. Now, could somebody T-bone me and take me out? Yes. But I don't not eat an apple because it's going to be a core. I don't not drink a glass of wine because I might get a hangover tomorrow. And I'm not going to not invest in the stock market and educate myself on options because there's a chance that I might lose money. Because if I can mitigate my risk and my risk tolerance, and I can use money that I am willing to possibly lose, then I'll be okay. And I think for me, one of the safer things for me to do at my age and my financial situation was the wheel strategy. And essentially what that is it's selling covered calls and cash secure puts. I am never a buyer. I've never been a buyer of options. It's not for me. And if I was younger and I had some more money and could tolerate a little bit more risk at my age and deal with the volatility. But for me, buying options just requires too many things that are outside my control. When we buy an option, we are wanting and hoping most of the time that, that a stock is going to go up or down. And they mitigate that by, getting into things that we could talk for hours about with spreads and things like that. But the wheel strategy is essentially using the collateral that you already have. It's using the things that you've built up over time and then saying to yourself, I can make an educated decision according to my cost basis and how much money I have as collateral or how many shares of a stock I have as a collateral to make a premium off those that are willing to be a little bit more risky. And to mitigate that risk even further, I do the wheel strategy with stocks that are not volatile. I mean, AT&T from its high and low over the last month is probably $1 swing each way. And when you're talking in options trading, that's $100 swing each way. And the younger generation will, not be for covered calls and not for cash covered puts because there is only a limited amount of profit. Your profit stops at the strike. So you can essentially sell a cash secure put. It can dive to zero. So they'll say that, your likelihood for loss, there's a big risk. You can go to zero. But then you're like, all right, well, if I do this with AT&T, are they going to go to zero by the end of the week? Not really the case.
Right. Yeah.
So very simply, when I have enough money to purchase 100 shares, that's going to be the contract amount of shares that we're going to deal with. I either choose to buy those 100 shares, or I can use the money that I would have purchased those shares with, and I can write an option or sell an option as a cash covered put. I'm using the cash that I've saved, and I'm going to use that cash as collateral, and I'm going to say, I want to pick a strike price that I'd be willing to buy 100 shares at. So with AT&T, once again, as an example, right now it's trading at like $29.50. If I want to buy 100 shares of it and I was happy paying $29 a share for it or $2,900 for the contract, I can sell a cash covered put. I put up my $2,900 as collateral, and the buyer of that option is going to put up a premium to purchase those shares. Now, what the buyer wants is for AT&T to drop to 27, because then they're going to get it at that price, but I have to give them 29. So they end up making the difference on that strike price. But for me, my main goal is All right, well, it can either go worthless and not hit the strike. I get to keep the premium and do the same thing over again, or it goes below that. It hits the strike. I get assigned. The buyer exercises that option, and I buy shares that I would have bought already. Well,
Right.
now I have 100. Now I have 100 shares of that stock. I'm going to do the reverse. Instead of putting up the money as collateral, I'm going to put up the 100 shares, and I'm going to do a covered call, and I cover that call with the 100 shares. Once again, making premium from the buyer, and that's called the wheel strategy. And there's tax implications. People are you find what you want to find in things, and people are going to criticize the wheel and say the tax implications, short-term capital gains, this, that, and the other thing. Like I'm not a guy that really cares too much about paying taxes. When you pay a lot of taxes, it means you made a lot of money, especially when I'm tax deferring all that money in my 403Bs and 457. So I'm pretty tax efficient. But for me, it's, and there's been mistakes. If you scroll through the channel, probably 5 or 6 thumbnails down, you'll see a covered call disaster. I made a really critical error against a general rule of thumb when it comes to cash covered calls, and it almost burnt me a little bit. But I still got on YouTube and told people about it so they don't make the same mistakes as I do. I think the wheel strategy is just, without babbling too much on it, the wheel strategy is a great way to increase the profitability with low volatile stocks by using your stock or cash as collateral to make premiums from the buyers of options. That's essentially what it is.
Yeah, I saw. There's a classic saying, right, that the stock market is for transitioning money from the impatient to the patient, and then I saw the options version of that, where selling covered calls and cash covered puts is transferring money from the YOLO options traders to the smart options traders. So I don't. Obviously, you can have success on the other end too. But
I'm not going to call them YOLOers, but I'll definitely say this: I don't think anybody's become a quick millionaire or billionaire by selling or writing options, right? The stories that you hear and the people that are in the advertisements and those people that are flashing cars and stuff, like those are people buying options. Those are definitely not the sellers. The way I think of it more as the buyers are people that are buying Tesla, where the sellers are the people that are buying index funds and not worrying too much about it, where they know that, yeah, I'm probably not going to have a 22% return of a year, but I'll take 7 all day. And the same for me. Like I could probably find something. I could probably buy an option and find a way to make a ton of percentage. But if I do this with 5 or 6 stocks and it drips me $25, $30 a stock in premium, I think right now I put this on the channel, but I think right now I'm at like $160 a week on a $10,000 portfolio of just options premium. And anybody that doesn't want $160 for essentially doing nothing, because I know that the passive income police will get on me for that, but it's about as passive income as I could ever imagine. And if you don't want $160 in your pocket, then I guess good for you. But it's something that not a lot of people go to. Those videos don't get a lot of views, to be honest. It's a very small niche market of people that want to watch it. But I think it's something that's extremely valuable, at least to educate yourself on. You need to know your options, and no pun intended. And I have so many friends that have these portfolios with 100 shares of this, that, and the other thing, and they're not even considering it or don't even know that they could do it because they hear options and they're like, nope, can't do that. And it's like, oh man, there's a million different types of options, that just like there's a million different types of sports. You can't say I don't like sports because you don't like the NFL.
Right.
Right. And you can't say I don't like options. It doesn't make any sense. You have to say like, I don't like writing covered calls. You can't say I don't like options. You have to say I don't like buying cash secure puts. You have to be a little bit more specific. And I think the financial advisors of this world and the people that are YOLOing on Wall Street Bets, they don't necessarily want a lot of people to know what they can do. And there's also people that make a career out of this and they're able to be successful. I don't have time to make a career out of day trading or trading options. This is just kind of, like I said, it's money after I've made money, paid my bills, put into my retirement, maxed out my Roth IRA, and then I can move on to, this is my form of YOLOing at 38. You know, let's write a $78 covered call on Aflac today. That was like my big job today, but it's Monday. It's the start of the week. Yeah, I wrote like $170 of calls today, and that's money that I can go buy beer with if I need to.
Absolutely. I mean, that's $10,000 portfolio. I'm not the teacher, but that's what, 1.6% a week?
Yep, exactly. The video I just did. So I started the dividend portfolio in May, and it has 20 dividend aristocrats in it. And with dividends and premiums, it's already returned me over 7% on the year already.
Awesome.
Since May. So we're talking 3 months. I've gotten a 7% return on my investment, pre-tax, obviously, because the premiums, I get that question all the time. The premiums are taxed as ordinary income. But like I said, if I tax defer 19.5 times 2 and everything else, I can afford to make that extra income and then also use that money to live off of next year when I'm front loading my retirement accounts again and taking 0 paychecks until April like I did this year.
Yeah, and the tax conversation is an interesting one because I'm not going to not make money because I'm going to get taxed 15%, right? It's like I'd still rather have 85%. I'd rather have $85 out of 100 than $0 out of 100. So it's kind of funny when people go out of their way not to do something on the implication that they're going to get taxed on it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's like not having a pina colada on the beach because you're afraid you might catch a buzz. Like there's some risk and reward. And yes, if you make money and you are not a criminal, you are going to pay tax. And it's really as simple as that. And you can find ways to be tax efficient, but there's only a certain limit to how tax efficient you are going to be. And at the end of the day, after that tax efficiency is gone, you got to pay the piper. And like you said, are you not going to take $85 because you have to pay them, $15 in taxes? Well, that's just bad strategy on your part. And I hope one day you change that opinion.
Absolutely. And I'm going to steal some time from the listeners right now because I have Brad on the podcast. So I want to do a quick dummy check of something I was thinking about doing in terms of selling a cash covered put. So I currently own 40 shares of RTX Raytheon at about $61. If I am to sell a cash covered put for a strike price that's below my cost basis, and it hits that strike price, I am then called to buy 100 shares below the strike price. And really all that would do is then drop my cost basis. Is that correct? But I'd obviously have to buy those 100 shares in terms of also getting the premium at the same time.
Yeah. So the only thing I heard that was a little off is you said below the strike price. When you sell a cash covered put or a cash secure put, you'll see them capitalized as like CSP, people call it. You are going to pay that strike. So if you have that at $61 and say you choose, and that's your basis, like you have 40 shares, it's trading at 61, you got them yesterday. So that's your basis. And you sell a cash secure put at $60 and it drops to 58. Well, essentially what just happened is now you have to pay $60 for a $58 share. That's where the buyer is going to win that $2 difference on you. But yes, you would then have it. And people ask me all the time, well, Brad, should I do this? I'm going to have 140 shares, right? If I get assigned to this, now I have 140 shares. What do I do? Because I only need 100. Well, I've done that before where I had 8 shares or something and I got assigned. Essentially what I did was I sold off the 8 when I got assigned. So I just had that flat 100 and then I started the wheel with just 100. But yeah, so essentially what's going to happen is you are going to get, if they exercise at that strike or below the strike for a put, if they exercise, you have to buy those 100 shares at the strike that you get to pick, which is another great part to being a seller of an option. You get to pick that. So if it's trading right now for $61 and your basis is 58, well, you might say, well, I want to lower my basis. I'm going to set my strike to 57. Now, if that's far away from the current share price, the premium might be lower because you're so far and that volatility side might be a little different. But yes, as the seller of these options on both sides, the put side and the call side, you get to choose either what you are going to be buying those 100 shares for or what you are going to be selling them for. And that's a big deal on the covered call side, because if you have a basis, let's take the same example. Let's say you have 100 shares of it. It's trading at 61, but your basis is 64. Well, you're not going to sell a covered call at $62, right? That's a difference of $2 on 100 shares. You just lost $200 of capital gains. So you're only ever going to write your calls above your basis unless there's something crazy. Like right now, Wells Fargo, I'm getting kicked in the throat with Wells Fargo. I think my basis is like $34 because I bought the 100 shares of it when it shot up last month, and frankly I didn't do enough research to know that was a fluke, and they were about to get kicked. Well, they got kicked back down, and it's been trading at $24. So if I don't even think I could find a premium at my basis. So I've been gambling a little bit somewhere in the middle and hoping that it climbs back up and I can eventually get to my basis. But right now, if I'm writing my calls at Wells Fargo at 6% above the share price and they have a great week, I'm gonna get assigned to sell 100 shares $5 below my basis.
Right.
That's a loss of $500. Now it's not the end of the world, because all I'm going to do is come right back and I'm going to sell a put at the same exact strike price and kind of offset that buy and sell. But yeah, the basis is the primary indicator that I use when I'm choosing what I want my strike price to be.
Yeah, it's a really cool concept, and it's something that I can align with a lot. And like I said, I've only sold one covered call. I was successful with it, and they won't always be successes, but it is an interesting thing to look at to kind of garner some more income along the way. I want to.
When you say success, you mean it went worthless?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. See, and I mean, you could take that one step further. And I asked because I was curious, and I knew what you meant. But if you pick a stock that you want and that you want 100 shares of, there's really successes in both ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, successes in both ways. Like I started, I think my first my first cash covered put was with AT&T, and I said to myself, this really is win-win for me. I'm either going to have this expire worthless, get to keep the premium, or I'm going to get assigned at a price that I was going to buy them at anyway, and I get the premium. So it's really win-win if you do your research and you choose your strike prices right.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely something that's been garnering more of my attention lately, and I've been trying to. It's always good to just expand, right? Always good to continue to learn things, like we've mentioned a lot of times here. Speaking of learning, I want to kind of shift gears here. So the conversation I've had with a lot of younger guys that probably either are in college or at that age where they should be in college right now on the podcast lately has been basically about college degrees and how the sentiment potentially is changing in the world about college degrees, especially with people really looking down on universities for massive amounts of debt that they're going to be collecting, then to potentially not find a job once they actually get out of college. But we haven't talked about a little bit more of the financial literacy, especially kind of on your end, because I know you're a high school teacher. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a high school teacher. I teach juniors and seniors. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think the one thing you always hear, you probably hear it more than anyone else, especially in the space that you're in, is you hear students, whether they be graduated or potentially in high school, but the conversation is like, why do I need to learn about George Washington crossing the Delaware when I don't know how to write a check or I don't know how to do my taxes? So I think it'd be interesting to talk to a current high school teacher about not only the importance of financial literacy, but maybe how it's dealt with at your school or at your district, and if it is really touched on at all in high school or middle school.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And if I could plug somebody, there's another financial YouTuber, and her name is Miss Be Helpful. Her name is Unelli, but she goes by Miss Be Helpful. And she essentially used to be a teacher, and she quit the teaching profession to start a nonprofit or work with a nonprofit that deals strictly with this literacy issue here in New York. And it needs to be talked about. And I mean, we can go as extreme to writing a check or opening a bank account, and there's certain things like that. But I think the thing that I try and tell my students is more of that avoidance of debt. And when it comes to college debt, I get a lot of flack that I don't think we have a college debt problem or crisis. I think we have a parent crisis. And And I only see that because I went to a state university here in New York, a great state university, a state university that the district that I'm in, an upper class kind of district. And when I tell people where I went to school, they kind of like laugh, like you went to a state school. Like, why would you do that? And the reason I went to a state school is because my mother said, no, you cannot go to that school. And I cried and I hated her and she was ruining my life. And my best friend was going to private school. Mom was like, no, no. And I think right now, from what I see, is there's a lot of problems with parents saying, no, we
Yeah.
cannot afford. They lay in bed with their spouses and they say to themselves, oh, honey, I don't know how we're going to do this. Oh, gosh. And they toss and turn all night when all they need to. I'd rather be tossing and turning that my 17-year-old daughter hates my guts because I wouldn't let her go blow 70 grand a year at a private school. So I mean, I just wanted to get that off my chest because we need to say no more often. And it's so hard that I see so many kids these days. The first time they're ever told no in their whole life is college acceptance, and they get their letter and they're like, I'm not accepting. They just don't understand.
Yeah, wait a minute. That's not the way it's supposed to go.
My district is very, very awesome with personal finance, and we have a great author that works in my district. He's a financial literacy multi-time author. It's incredible, and I think, but there's things that I see now that I don't necessarily love. For example, we have like a stock market challenge, right? And there's this club and these kids get together and they get $10,000 of play money. And then every week they get updated on their portfolio and they have to earn as much money as possible. And my kids are like, oh, what would you buy this week? And I'm like, VTSAX. And I think those are the things I think we need to talk about first and foremost as far as financial literacy is avoiding debt and avoiding short-term gratification. You do not need to go to school because it's beautiful there. You do not need to go to school because it has a great party scene. You do not need to go to school because it has an awesome football team. The amount of times I hear kids say they want to go to Michigan and I ask them why, and they say, oh, wouldn't it be awesome to be at a Michigan football game? I said, listen, you're going to be in school for 10 months. There's going to be 8 home games and the weather's going to be crappy for most of them. You're going to go to Notre Dame or you're going to go to Duke and there's going to be 20 home games and most of them are going to be during the week. And if you're good at school, then you're not going to be going out on Tuesday and dancing around at Duke. Like they don't know how to mitigate, long-term success versus short-term gratification. And I think if we can financially teach kids that, listen, like my kids come to me and they're like, oh, Mr. Finn, I got into here. I said, don't tell me where you got in. Tell me where you got out and tell me how much debt you have. And that leads to the situation where my kids think I hate private schools. They're like, I'm like, oh, great. You got into school, where you go? And they're like, oh, you don't want to know. And I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? They're like, I'm going to Texas. And my next question is, like, who's paying for it? Is grandma paying for it? Did grandma work her butt off her whole life so she can send her granddaughter to Texas? Great. Are you leaving school with no debt? Awesome. Now all you need to do is realize how blessed you are that happened. I'm not against private schools. I'm not against it at all. I'm against college debt. But the only reason we have college debt is because parents don't know how to say no and they keep taking out the loans. Could you imagine if parents started saying no and didn't take out loans? Colleges are businesses. They would have to lower tuition. It's kind of like the medical field. It's a reason why it costs you $1,000 to get an x-ray. Well, because you have insurance and insurance pays for it, right? You pay the copay and then $1,000 comes out of this land of make-believe insurance fund. And an x-ray costs $1,000 where if we didn't have insurance, it'd cost $25. It's the same thing with tuition. I see it a lot on a high school level, but I think short-term gratification is the cause of all of our debt. I want it now. I want to buy it now. I don't know the difference between a want and a need. I want it now. I want it now. We all seen Willy Wonka. I want it now. I want it now. And I see it with adults too. And I used to be that guy. So I don't judge just because you want something and you don't understand the difference between long and short-term gratification, it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you uneducated. You know, if you're an adult and someone said to you like, whoa, slow down, like think about retirement. And you're like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to retire till I'm 80. You know, you're going to make some changes. And I think students would too, but this cycle of, I'm going to have a college party and they're going to decorate my locker. And then I'm going to wear a sweatshirt. I'm going to get on TikTok with my sweatshirt and I'm going to go do this. Like, if I hear that I want to go to school at Georgia because it's beautiful there one more time, I'm like, I'll show you beauty. Like you don't need to. I went to the University of Stony Brook here on Long Island. It's a state school. I'm like, there's beautiful parts of Stony Brook.
See wolves.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think talked about the parent problem. I think there's also a perception problem. I graduated high school about 10 years ago, and when I was going through, and again, it probably depends on where you are, but when I was going through, it was like if you weren't going to a 4-year college, people looked down on you. It was like, what are you doing with your life? Like, why aren't you going to college? And that's just such a horrible mindset and a horrible culture, I think, to breed because the amount of successful people that haven't gone to college, it's you can't put everybody into the same box. And totally agree. It's a shame that community colleges aren't utilized as much as they probably should be. And like you said, if you are going to come out debt free and you can go to wherever you want, and hopefully you are thankful and you realize how fortunate you are to have been put in that position, then that's awesome. And college degrees definitely serve their purpose, but it just really doesn't need to be for everyone. And there's so many different avenues that can be taken.
Amen, brother. Yeah, I'm 10 years before that. I'm class of 2000, and I don't know where that shift happened, but I mean, I didn't know where my best friend was going to college until we were leaving in August. Like, that wasn't something we cared about.
Right.
When I went to college, when I went to school in the late 90s and I graduated in 2000, you went into the army because you were proud to be a soldier, not because you were, quote, too dumb to go to school. You know, when I was in school, you went into the electrical union and you went into the plumbers, or you went into the city, all these steel workers, iron workers. You went into those jobs because your father was a steel worker and your grandfather was an electrician, and you were proud to hold that legacy. Now, my buddies that went and did those jobs that now have plumbers and they have their own companies, they can't find people to work because if you are graduating and you go into the army, people think you're a dummy. And if you graduate and you want to be a plumber, well, why are you being like, you're not going, you're absolutely right. Unless you are going to be a lawyer, a doctor, or a teacher, and maybe there's some other professions in there that I can't think of off the top of my head that you need to go to school for. There's you don't have to go. Some of these, oh man, you get education. It's a sour subject for me. But I mean, the amount of kids that come and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to major in communications." I'm like, "What does that mean?" Or multicultural studies. What are you? And Dave Ramsey says it's like, "Why are you? What are you going to school for?"
Yeah.
When you go into school, and I'm not saying a freshman needs to know what they're going to be when they want to grow up, but you better be going to that school for a reason. I went to the state school. I went to Stony Brook because I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. And even though it was in my own backyard and people took it for granted, it's regarded as one of the best science institutions in the nation. So I went there and I didn't know if I want to major in physics or electrical engineering or mechanical engineering, but I at least knew why I was going to that school. I didn't pick a school because it had a great Greek life. And you're absolutely right when you say this perception of if you don't go to school. And I'll leave you this little side thing that there's a kid that went to my school. His name is Josh Lapzan, and he has an amazing TED talk. This kid somehow got through and figured it out and went to, I live in Nassau County, went to Nassau County Community College for 2 years when all of his kids went out and YOLO'd, all of his friends. Everyone told him he was a donkey. His parents' friends didn't want to make eye contact. This kid went to community college, got his associate's degree with a 4.0, went on to Cornell, banged out Cornell, and then went and got his master's from Brown. So the kid that went to 2 years he got scholarships, I think, to Cornell, but he ended up being the youngest school board member. He's on my school board. Like a kid that I was teaching 4 years ago is now on my school board, giving me tenure. It was mind blowing, but he was a prime example of the fact that, like, why did I need to go away to college when I can stay home? I can get my general education subjects out of the way. I can make a few bucks working part-time at the Ralph's Italian ice place around the block. And then when I'm ready to go to university and really focus on my subject, when I know what I want to be when I grow up, I can go.
Yeah.
And there's too few people like that right now.
Yeah. And I really hope that sentiment is changing. And I think I wouldn't say the tides are turning, but I think they're starting to, at least we're starting to see ripples in the right direction. I mean, there's everyone who's coming out of college with this mass amount of student debt and then realizing that they don't even know what they went to college for and they don't know how they're going to get a job. I hope as they enter the workforce and they work up the ranks, hopefully there will be some understanding that, maybe it's just because somebody has a degree from a lesser school, or they don't even have a degree at all, but they're perfectly competent and they can do a good job at what you're asking them to do, is enough to get people into positions where they can make a difference. I mean, you even look at Elon Musk. He said before that he doesn't care where your degree is from. He doesn't even care if you have a degree. He admitted that if you have a degree from Harvard, it'll probably get your foot in the door, right? But that doesn't mean you're necessarily a shoe-in. And I think the other thing we talked about with loans is such another interesting conversation, because once schools know that loans are more or less guaranteed, well, guess what? They're going to increase the price of tuition. And with that increase in the price of tuition, it now becomes a recruiting game. So let me make my gym as cool as it can be. Let us have ice cream trucks that roll down the street on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and look at our stadium and all these kinds of things. And it's all just because they want more people, which then is more money, right? If people stop taking these loans, this money would not be feeding into the system. Those things would then die down, and then it would probably go back to more of the, hey, I'm going to go to the school around the corner. I don't need to go, 40 states over to the other side of the country just because I want a beach. And I'm not saying this fits for everybody, but it's just kind of along the same conversation that we were having.
Oh, it's incredible, and you make a great point. It's something fun for you to Google on the side is how many student athletes come from other countries. I remember getting my master's in education, and I was talking with one of the soccer players, and he's from Australia, and I'm like, "Dude, you're from Australia?" And he's like, "Yeah, mate." And I'm like, "What the hell did you come to this stupid private school, a no-name private school in New York, the United States, from Australia to play college?" He's like, "We don't have college sports." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "School is for education, not for sports, but you Americans haven't figured that out yet." And I'm like, "What?" And he goes, if you really want to be frustrated, I'm here on a full ride. I'm like, "You mean to tell me that I'm paying 72 grand for this school right here? That's a private school a mile from my house, and my tax dollars and my tuition is paying your tuition because your country is smart enough to know that school shouldn't be about sports, it should be about education. So you came here?" And he's like, "Yep." And I'm like, "Oh man, those Australians got to figure it out." He goes, "Pretty much you're the only country in the world, first world country in the world that has college sports." And I did that research, and it's incredible. Everyone's always like, "Why do you come from Canada down here?" You came from Canada down here because they didn't have it there. And you're so right when you talk about that college isn't about education. It's about sport. Think of it right now. I can guarantee you with COVID that no colleges don't care that they're teaching online classes. Right now, Notre Dame cares that they don't have a football program. Right, right now, and maybe not Stanford, but because they don't get scholarships. But there's there's so many countries that right now, Alabama, Roll Tide is not rolling anywhere. They couldn't care less that they're teaching online. What they care about is, oh my God, what, like Duke right now, and Duke's another great school. Maybe not the greatest example, but you think about schools that are like, wait, you mean to tell me we might not have a basketball program this year?
Right. Kansas.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You mean to tell me that we might not have a lacrosse program? Look at Denver. Denver got put on the map because of the lacrosse program. You mean to tell me we might not have a lacrosse program for 2 years in a row? And then people are like, well, isn't school about school? No, not here in the United States. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And those Australians that we're bringing here on a full ride, we're sending them right back to Australia to make their economy better. So that's
Yeah. And like I said, I can't hate the player, man. I hate the game. But I never would have even thought that, like, and you see it even in the UK, like they don't play sports in uni. They're all club teams. They choose, do I want to be an academic or do I want to pursue my sports career? Here, you can pursue your sports career and fake academics. And the kids that are trying to be academics have to live in the shadow of athletes, sometimes depending on their school.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing going on, and hopefully as time passes, we'll get it a little bit more squared away. I wanted to, as we kind of get closer to closing this thing up, I wanted to talk a little bit outside of finance and education. If there's anything that you do on a personal basis to accomplish personal goals or stay grounded, whether it be books, podcasts, anything like that, that you wouldn't mind sharing.
Absolutely, man. I think contentment and happiness is something that's super, super important to not only my financial success, but my own personal happiness. I the What people see on the internet is not a sham. I am a real person and I am this happy to be alive. I've had some unfortunate circumstances that really have made me appreciate life. I lost both my parents young. I lost my brother in 2003. It's certain things that make you appreciate life, but I think that contentment, being happy with who you see in the mirror every single day, and that has nothing to do with how much money you have or how much you work out, or the job that you have or the degree that you have. It's being happy in your own skin and adapting to the different changes in life. The things that I'm proud of now in my life, they weren't even in my life years ago. I have two kids under two. Like 3 years ago, I didn't know, how to change a diaper. And now at 38 years old, I'm running around the house like a madman with my naked daughter screaming, "Go pee pee on the potty, get yourself a lolly." And if I can look at myself now 5 years ago, I'd be like, what is this guy doing singing Moana songs in the car with his daughter? And you make fun of your friends that have kids before you, and you're like, I'll never be that guy. But you realize the true happiness is in joys in life. And, to another example is this COVID thing. I have my son just turned 10 months. His birthday's coming up soon, his 1 year birthday. And I always try and find the silver lining. It sucks, this COVID, but I'll look back at it and I won't remember it for sucking. I'll look back and I'll remember it because I got to spend a critical developmental time in my son's life. And I'm choking up just thinking about it. Like I, I got to spend every single waking moment for essentially the entire first year of my son's existence. The time that I got to spend with my son, I only realized it because I didn't spend that time with my daughter. When my daughter was 9 months old, I had to send her away to daycare, and I didn't get to do that with my son. So I think it's finding the silver lining, literally in everything. I can find the joy and happiness in every situation. And I think that's something that really makes my life fulfilled. I sleep like a baby, Rich. Let me tell you, when I put my head down, I know that I've done everything I can to better myself, my family self, and my future. I do read a lot, everything that I can get my hands on. I'm not somebody that goes on and preaches like I read a book a week, but if something comes across my desk or if something gets, put in front of me, I love podcasts. I am first and foremost a YouTube viewer. Before I'm ever a YouTube creator, people are shocked and amazed when they see or hear how many, how much hours of YouTube I watch, or they'll recommend somebody on YouTube. And I'm like, oh yeah, did you see that video? I can't say it enough. People have to be more happy with who they are, regardless of what their friends say. We've all heard like the internet and what it does, and we go on and we try and live a fake life for people that we don't even really know or even like that much. I'm a simple person, and I've learned how to find the simple joys in life. I have an iPhone 5S because I don't need a big one. I drive an old used car because it gets me where I need to go. And I spend time watching Disney movies, and that's all I really need in life. And I think if people can be content, if people can be happy with who they are, if you're not happy with who you are, that's on you.
Yeah.
In my classroom, I keep a mirror and I call it the self-reflection mirror. And anytime a kid is trying to like beat themselves up or blame me or, you gave me this on a test, I just walk them over to the reflection mirror and I just say, just tell the reflection mirror who took the test, me or you. I don't give grades. I report them, and the same is in life. Like I, I don't go on and like my kids are not on the internet, not because I'm like want to be like a kid hoarder and like not show them pictures, but me because like I want to give them that privacy. I want them to be able to establish their own identity and make their own happiness. And I've screwed up a bunch, Rich. I've been a dirtbag, and I've been that guy that I wasn't proud of, and luckily in my 38 years, I've had the time, the opportunity, and the blessing to go back and be able to reflect on those and not point fingers and look in the mirror and say, hey, are you happy with who you are? If not, fix it. Simple as that. If you don't like your financial situation, fix it. If you don't know how to fix it, find somebody to teach you. Find somebody that's doing well. All the cliches that you hear, you're the average of the 5 people that you hang out with. Simple things like this are little things that you can really take a long way to just knock the ever-living crap out of life. It doesn't need to be as hard as you really want it to be.
I think that's such an awesome perspective to have, because I think in the finance and the money world, especially if you're a creator online, it naturally is going to be something you consume because you enjoy doing it. And because if you're creating that content, I mean, look what we're doing right now, right? We're spending an hour on our Monday night talking about this stuff. And it can get very self-centered if you don't branch out and think about the big picture. And people have said it a million times, but if you're not happy with $10 in the bank, you're not going to be happy with $10 million in the bank. The money's not really going to change what that perspective is. And I think so many people are tied up in continuing to make more and more money, which is great. I mean, we're all kind of in this same game together. You talked about playing a game of your net worth earlier. Obviously, being competitive against yourself is awesome and trying to see yourself continue to progress. But if you don't have the rest of your life figured out, then it really doesn't make a difference what's going on in your bank account.
Amen, man. I want people to think I'm poor, but I want people to think I'm poor and then get to know me and realize that I have all the wealth I'll ever need. And most of that wealth has nothing to do with monetary value. It really doesn't. I mean, you can, what's the meme? I just saw a meme the other day. It was so true. It was like, you can live rich now and be broke forever, or live broke now and be rich forever, and these things are so cliche, but so true and they're just back to those core values, live on less than you make, invest the rest and be really, really kind to people. That's really all it takes. It's not that hard. At the end of every single one of my YouTube videos, for I want to say the better part of 2 years, I end every single video with, until I see you on the next one, stay positive, work really, really hard, and always please be kind to others. And that's a foundation that my parents instilled in me. I didn't even come up with that, since I was a little kid. My father, just work hard. I wasn't a straight A student, and I teach AP physics now. And when I tell people I teach physics, oh, you're smart. And I smile and nod like, no, I just worked my butt off. Physics was the hardest subject I ever took in my life. And that's why I teach it now, because if I was able to take something that everybody feared and make it something that people can understand and be joyful about, that's what I wanted to do. And then I look 20 years later, in retrospect, I'm doing the same thing with money. People are just as afraid to invest in money as they are taking physics. But if I can take it and break it down to a level that we can understand, and I can use my God-given gift to teach and educate, I can make, investing just as easy as I make physics for my students. So it was all about that work ethic and positivity, finding the good. You find what you want to find in people. You find what you want to find in every situation. If you want negativity, you can go out and find it. But I can guarantee you can take that same situation and go in with an open mind, and you can find a positive inside that situation. So that's staying positive and be kind to others. It's very, very hard to get in a fist fight in a bar if you walk up to somebody and say, hey, how are you today?
Yeah.
It's really, really hard for somebody to be rude to you when you just a subtle hello, just a subtle, like it, it's hard. You have to be a real a-hole to be rude to somebody that's kind to you. Does it happen? Absolutely. There's tragedy in this world. But, that's, I think if it's so true at the end of the video. And I say it so seamlessly, and it's not even in my script where I'm like, okay, do the outro. It's more of a reminder to myself. It's more of a, that's what I said a little while ago, I lost both my parents, and that's what they taught me. Stay positive, work really, really hard, always be kind to other people.
Yeah. Awesome insight. Before we close up things here, obviously, I'll have your link posted wherever this thing's going to be. But any last week, that was an awesome little talk we just had there. So I don't want to prod you for any more. But if there's anything else from the conversation that we had today that you wanted to get out there, and then just let people know where they can find you and where they can continue following along.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, you can find me on Instagram. I don't post that much. Somebody told me that like YouTube is for education and then Instagram is for letting people know that you're a real person. So I use Instagram story a lot just to let people know that what I'm doing, and sometimes get away from personal finance sometimes. And so that's the Fin Mindset. That was the second name of my channel. So just to play off my last name, the Fin, and the mindset that I have about this positivity. And then over the years, I've shrunk the YouTube channel down from Baby Steps Brad to the Fin Mindset. Now it's just plain old Brad Fin. I am who I am, and I'm very proud to be who I am. So you can find me by just Googling Brad Fin. Hopefully none of my arrests pop up, and I've got my Google search onto all positive things by now, but that's really it. And like I said, please remember that if you make it over and you subscribe or you follow me, I appreciate it. And every time I speak into the camera, I know how big 20,000 people is. And when I speak, I make sure that I give the respect to those 20,000 people that have taken the time and the opportunity to join my journey and use it for whatever reason they want. And that's it. And I tell people, stay positive, work really, really hard, always be kind to other people.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thanks again, Brad.
I'm right on, man.